Georgia O'Connor here. Big up Julius. Ring IQ. Welcome to the relay.
Welcome to the relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. It appears that Jasmine Parr already has her next opponent and her next fight lined up for the first quarter of next year. She's going to be opposite the ring, Viviana Ruiz, for what is the WIBA world title set to go down late in February in the land down under in Australia. A few things you need to know about this fight. This is a step up in competition for Jasmine Parr. This is not your according to Hoyle bring along fight intended to just get the fighter some rounds in the bank. There's genuine banana skin energy in association with this fight because that's what it is. This ain't just a bring along. It's not just an experience fight. It's a step up in class, a step up, I'd say, from Nacia Costello, who young Jasmine Parr has fought at least 2 times. Jasmine Parr, who sports a professional record of 3 wins, no losses, and no draws, campaigning in the women's flyweight division. This is a step up in class, it is. You have to remember that Jasmine Parr is only 19, 20 years old. She only has 3 professional contests, 3 professional bouts. Viviana Ruiz has more than twice as many rounds in the bank and twice as many fights, more than twice as many fights as young Jasmine. There is a noticeable discrepancy in the fighters' ages. Viviana is almost 20 years older than Jasmine Parr, give or take a year. So, I mean, Jasmine at minimum will have youth and freshness on her side, but not experience, not rounds in the bank. That edge has to go to Viviana. Viviana, comparatively, has been facing better fighters than Jasmine has even had the opportunity to face, collecting the unbeaten scalps of Beck Moss, Jennifer Quevedo, Darianis Garcia, Finette Yanguit. What stands out about Viviana's body of work so far is that there's only one fighter with an upside-down record on her resume. More often than not, in the early stages of a fighter's career, their first 10 fights, it's not uncommon to see a couple of fighters in there, a couple of journeymen or women with upside-down records, whereas Viviana, she's only fought 1 fighter with an upside-down record. She only has 1 professional loss in what was her second professional contest opposite the ring, unbeaten Jacinta Austin. And there's no shame in suffering a loss that early in your career. These things happen. Viviana Ruiz is not... She's not cavalier. She jabs her way into striking distance to set up the right hand, and she actually has a decent right hand. She's a mid-range fighter. She's not a long-distance stick-and-move outside jabber, and she's not a phone booth fighter. She's a mid-range fighter who seems to do her best work at mid-range. Inside, she's more prone to clinching and wrestling than letting the fists fly. She's not a phone booth fighter. She's a mid-range fighter. Decent set of legs to manage the distance, decent jab to set up the punches, respectable right hand. There does seem to be some mustard on it. And because Jasmine Parr is so young, she's only 19, 20 years old, only 3 professional bouts. Less than half the fights that Viviana has, less than half the rounds. Viviana has banked approximately, 52, 53 rounds? The Jasmine's 24. I see a situation here where, I reiterate, this is not a bring-along fight. This is a step up in class. This is a step up from anybody that Jasmine has fought so far. I consider this a step up from Nacia Costello, who Jasmine Parr faced 2 times, once in her pro debut and again in her last fight. Upsets happen. Look at what happened to Mary Spencer, opposite the ring, a more experienced fighter, a former champion in Femke Hermans. Sometimes talented fighters take on too much too soon on the premise that they're talented enough to take the risk, talented enough to do it. While I'm not calling for the upset outright, I'm just telling you this is not a bring-along fight. Jasmine Parr is a Muay Thai fighter that's transitioning into boxing. And one thing that's consistent with Muay Thai fighters is they've got a mean streak and they really like to go. They like to hit the ground running from the opening bell. They're very aggressive. Muay Thai fighters and kickboxers that transition into boxing. At only 3-0 with just something like 23, 24 rounds in the bank, Jasmine Parr has not yet had the time to develop a fighter's temperance and a fighter's poise in the ring, to condition their opponent to defend from certain punches in order to leave them susceptible to others. Conditioning the opponent with a bit of poise and misdirection. Opposite the ring, Viviana Ruiz. Viviana, she's not a gunner. She's not a fighter that's just going to march forward and wing shots and leave herself herself wide open for counter shots. She's going to try to set up her punches. Jasmine has to be weary of this, because Viviana will be looking to set her up for a big right hand. I'm going to ride the fence on this one. This one is too close to call. Is Jasmine Parr really ready for a more experienced fighter in Viviana Ruiz? There really is only one way to find out. And while she may very well have what it takes to win the fight, we won't know until both fighters are in the ring and the outcome is decided. It's ambitious, it's ballsy, and as stated, it's not a bring-along fight. This is a step up in competition, a step up in class. Look for Jasmine Parr versus Viviana Ruiz in the second quarter of next year, late February. In men's light heavyweight news, former two-division champion turned analyst Tim Bradley says Bivol, that's a bad man. He's going to chop up Beterbiev. To a Beterbiev, the light heavyweight division's unified champion, who's set to be in action in the first quarter of next year. Opposite the ring, Anthony Yard. If he makes it past him, do we get the fight? Following 36 lopsided minutes on the night, Bivol had successfully defended his 175-pound trinket. In doing so, Tim Bradley stood firmly on his feet, hands clasped together in amazement. With a terrific 2022 now behind him, Bradley took the time to succinctly heap praise on the soon-to-be 32-year-old. That's a bad boy, said Bradley during an interview with KO Artist Sports. He beat a heavyweight. Zurdo Ramirez comes in around 200 pounds, and he backed him up. Bivol, that's a bad dude, man. The author of this article chose to characterize Dmitry Bivol's title that he's defended many, many times successfully. He chose to call it a trinket. It's not a trinket. It's a title. It's a world title. And Dmitry Bivol is not a trinket champion. He's a world champion. It's almost like he was trying to make the guy seem like less than what he is. Like he's less than a champion because he only has one belt. He's been WBA light heavyweight champion for approximately 4 years. 9 successful title defenses within those 4 years. He's not a trinket champion. He's a world champion with a very respectable resume, I might add. I've got Bivol when he fights Beterbiev. Man, listen to me. Bivol knows every aspect of the ring. He knows how to get off. His control game is fantastic, as well as the inside. The defense of Bivol, I know the power Beterbiev has is different. Hands of stone type power. He's still got to land that stuff. He's still got to figure out a way to land that stuff. It's a 50-50 fight due to the power, and Beterbiev is smart as well, but the legs, that's the difference right there. The legs of Bivol are way better. I think he's going to chop up Beterbiev. He's going to chop his ass up. That is former two-division champion Tim Bradley's commentary, echoing sentiments I've expressed many times here on the channel. I, too, think that Dmitry Bivol's legs will be the difference. I've been saying it for 3 years. Artur Beterbiev, devastating puncher and crafty boxer that he might be, he's not getting any younger, and Bob Arum putting distance between Artur and Dmitry really didn't help Artur's situation. I didn't forget that late last year, when Dmitry Bivol was inquiring about doing that unification match with Artur, it was Bob Arum that poured cold water on that fight. It was Bob Arum that poured cold water on that whole thing, saying that Dmitry Bivol is boring and has no pizzazz. Well, your fighter, your champion, he's not getting any younger, so the sooner you let him deal with this guy, the better it is for him. As it stands, Dmitry Bivol, he had some very big fights this year, very big fights. But Artur Beterbiev was not one among them, and who do we have to thank for that? I don't know. Perhaps had Bob been more receptive to the fight at some point last year, it could have happened early this year. Perhaps. In reference to that fight, Dmitry Bivol himself says,
I can beat Beterbiev. Why not? I have good skills, defense, combinations.
because I believe in my skills, I could beat Beterbiev. Why not? Bivol said in his post-fight press conference after the Zurdo Ramirez fight. You got fight fans out there. They fall in love with any guy that can hit hard, any guy that can crack, and they immediately write off fighters like a Dmitry Bivol, who perhaps aren't as flashy, though are fully capable of out-hustling a strong puncher like an Artur Beterbiev. I could lose. It depends on my preparation. It depends on my mental. I could have lost to Ramirez, too. I tried to do everything right in my camp, and I tried to believe in myself. I tried to be focused on the fight. Why not win against Beterbiev? I have good defense. I have good combinations. I have good boxing skills. Why couldn't I beat him? Of course I could. I just need a good training camp and good sparring partners, and I could. You remember what people said about Canelo? We're all people, not monsters. Someone stronger, someone faster, but We're all people.
Artur Beterbiev is a people.
A person, a fighter, a champion, an aging fighter, an aging champion.
A strong one, and I understand that power really is the last thing to go, but a fighter's legs.
His reaction time and his reflexes are often the first.
Matchroom Boxing head and Dmitry Bivol's promoter, Eddie Hearn, said Bivol has turned public perception following his pair of wins, and he's quite right.
I've maintained my original position throughout. I've maintained that I think Dmitry Bivol has the right base style to beat Artur Beterbiev, not just on the premise of styles, but also the intangibles, like the fighter's ages and how long it takes to make the fight. And I don't think that Bob Arum did his horse in the race any favors, putting distance between
them.
Dmitry and Artur.
Your guy's the guy that needs this fight to happen sooner rather than later, but you preferred to put him in there with other guys.
Not that there was anything wrong with the Joe Smith Jr. fight, but the Joe Smith Jr. fight does not present the same challenges that the Dmitry Bivol fight presents. Unless we forget, Dmitry beat Joe years before Artur got in the ring with him.
So you can't say that it was a better fight. You can't say that Joe was a better option than Dmitry.
You can't say it was a better fight. I have to say, a year and a half ago, I would say on paper, Beterbiev was the favorite in that fight. Not anymore. I honestly believe that Dmitry Bivol is the best 175-pound fighter in the world, said Hearn. As good and dangerous as Beterbiev is, I do not believe he will beat Dmitry Bivol at all.
That's if they ever even fight.
That's if Artur ends up making it past Anthony Yarde. Most people are expecting him to, but boxing is the theater of the unexpected. There's always room for surprises, though even if he beats that guy,
no guarantee he fights Dmitry right after that.
Artur Beterbiev has several mandatories waiting in the queue. One among them is Anthony Yarde, who he's set to face early next year, and right behind him is the WBC's mandatory challenger, Callum Smith, and right behind Callum Smith is the winner of the upcoming IBF final eliminator
between former champion John Pascal and Michael Eifurt.
Whoever wins that fight becomes the IBF's mandatory challenger for Artur Beterbiev's red belt. So as you can see, Artur has a full plate. You could argue that any one of these guys is a more beatable guy than Dmitry Bivol. You could give Artur very good odds against Anthony Yarde and Callum Smith and the winner of Pascal versus Eifurt. Better odds than you could give him.
I mean, even if you think he beats Dmitry Bivol, Dmitry is still more of a challenge than those guys are.
I've seen an effort in some circles, very small ones, to try and make it Dmitry Bivol's fault that this fight hasn't happened yet, in spite of all of the documentation, the clear paper trail that shows it's been Bob Arum resisting this fight, pouring cold water over it, and in effect...
Oh, I know that over time Bob has had a change of heart, and he is here today more receptive to that fight than he was over a year ago.
Previous instances, Bob poured cold water on the fight, saying that Dmitry is boring and has no pizzazz, that he's not doing no fight on dead zone. That's what he had to say before. What he has to say now is that he won't let network politics get in the way of the fight, but it took a long time.
More time than Artur has. Time is a luxury Artur doesn't have.
Waiting this long to warm up to the idea of that fight didn't better Artur's chances.
Didn't benefit him.
So, I mean, we'll see if we actually even get this fight in the coming year. And finally, just in keeping with the theme of, heavyweight news, John Pascal and Michael Eifurt reached terms for an IBF final eliminator in order to avoid a purse bid hearing. This news broke well over a month ago in October, and the two are set to face each other in the first quarter of next year at a venue to be determined in Canada, with Toronto eyed as the likely destination. It will mark the first fight on home soil for Jean Pascal since July of 2018, his win over Laval, Quebec hometown, while Eifurt will fight for the first time outside of Europe in his career.
Jean Pascal was initially supposed to face Joshua Buatsi after Lou DiBellia placed the winning bid, but the Buatsi people, the Matchroom people really, they didn't like the idea of Joshua sharing the ring with Jean Pascal on the premise that they could not agree to terms when it came to VADA testing.
There was a falling out between the teams when it came to the anti-doping testing and when exactly that would begin, though if I'm being honest, that's just the cover story. In truth, I think the Matchroom people figured we can put Joshua in a bigger, better fight than a Jean Pascal fight on the Queensbury Promotions side of things, because even though Lou DiBella placed the winning bid. The fight was supposed to be aired by way of BT Sport in Queensbury.
Looked to me like Lou DiBella and Frank Warren were trying to tag team Eddie to poach one of his fighters for at least one fight. Joshua Buatsi being that fighter.
And if Lou DiBella and Frank Warren were involved, you can bet your bottom dollar that so was Bob. That had they gotten that fight across the finish line, in all likelihood here in America, it would have been shown by way of ESPN or ESPN Plus. As it stands, that fight didn't happen, but this one's about to.
Pascal versus Eifurt.
The Pascal versus Eifurt winner will have to wait out at least one more mandatory title defense before getting to the division's top prize. Beterbiev is due to defend against England's Anthony Yarde, who is the WBO's #1 contender.
Don't forget Callum Smith, too. By all rights, he should be ahead of the Pascal versus Eifurt winner in the queue on the premise that he was already named the WBC's mandatory challenger before the outcome of that fight was even decided.
Is decided, I should say, since the fight hasn't happened yet. Just a few weeks ago at the WBC's convention, Callum Smith was officially named the mandatory challenger to Artur Beterbiev.
The winner of this fight between John Pascal and this Eifurt guy, they might have to wait 2 fights. They might have to wait a while before they get their shot at the red belt.
Doesn't look like Pascal versus Eifurt is going to have any involvement from Frank Warren and Queensbury and BT. Likely because, well, now there are no UK-based fighters involved. John Pascal is based out of Canada, and this Eifurt guy is based out of Germany.
Buatsi versus Pascal would have been a hotter ticket than Pascal versus Eifurt. Buatsi versus Pascal would have taken place in the UK. Pascal versus Eifurt, they're doing it in Canada, which means they're relying on John Pascal's name value to sell this thing.
I don't know at this time who's supposed to be promoting this show.
Promoting it in Canada.
And who, if anyone, is going to air the show here stateside in the United States for a US-based audience. It is a fight of some significance because the winner becomes the mandatory challenger to the winner of Beterbiev versus Yarde, though all the same, there are certain aspects of all of this that are somewhat immaterial.
I wouldn't have minded Joshua Buatsi bailing on this fight with John Pascal if he walked into a better fight, a bigger fight with someone else, though as it stands, we still don't know who Joshua Buatsi is going to be fighting.
What if he ends up fighting Dmitry Bivol? I don't mind that fight. I like that fight, but it's not a fight that I think that Joshua Buatsi is ready for. It would seem to me like a fight where he's skipping steps.
I'd say he is. From Craig Richards to Dmitry Bivol.
It's a common opponent between them, but they're worlds apart. We'll see what happens.
Next year we will.